How are you? I don't know if should I introduce myself? I don't know if you know anything about me, but why don't I just say a couple words? I grew up in Ohio. That's where I came from. I went to college in Ohio. I was in the Peace Corps for 2 years. I was in the country of Thailand in the late 60s. I came back.
You're a famous football player. You should tell that.
Well, not that famous, but I played football. I was a little bit too small. And I started at Ohio State, and I thought, I need to go to a college where they need me. So I went to a much smaller college, Denison University, and I told you I was in the Peace Corps. I came back. I was a small businessman. I was in the state legislature for 10 years. I was in the U.S. Congress for 24. And I was an ambassador for about 3.5 years in Rome to the World Food Program, the FAO, IFAD, and related UN agencies. And you would think with that kind of background that it would be hard to be humble. I mean, I'm here with Tony Blair and speaking at Yale, but politicians, we get humbled all the time. And I remember an interesting story that happened to me when I first was running for Congress, and it was in Dayton, Ohio, and it was a very tough campaign, and not partisan, not mean, but we had something like 26 debates, and there was a lot of money spent, and anyway, it looked like I was going to win the last 2 weeks, and so a friend of mine came running in, and I was in a room like this, with my supporters because we were deciding what to do in the last 2 weeks. And he said, Tony, you're not going to believe this, but Time Magazine is on the phone. They want to speak to you. And I thought, wow, Time Magazine. I mean, when a reporter knew your name, in those days, it was really something, especially somebody from Time Magazine. I wasn't even elected yet. And I'm thinking, this is exciting. I've really arrived. And I said, well, get the name. I'll call him back in 10 minutes. So they did that, and I talked to my friends and supporters there. I said, well, what do you think? I want to say 3 things. I said, this is my chance to really make a hit in the United States, and I really want to be heard on this issue. So everybody said, sounds good. I said, let's get that person back on the phone. So we did, and this is what she said, and I'm thinking, here it comes. This is my debut in the United States. And she says, Tony, would you be renewing your subscription to Time Magazine? Obviously, I don't read Time Magazine anymore, and 25 years ago, I probably would have, if you were to ask me to talk about faith and poverty or faith in anything, faith in politics, I would have probably laughed. I mean, my love of God, my foundation of any kind of faith or religion was lacking. I mean, I didn't even know people that knew anything about faith. Matter of fact, I had to go to the Congress of the United States to find God. Can you believe that? And it's a long story. I won't go into it. But anyway, I fell in love with this person called God and fell in love with his son. And it changed my life in a very interesting and remarkable way. So today, instead of trying to talk to you about poverty and globalization, the sunny part of globalization, the dark part of globalization, and talk about the readings that you have read that were required of you, I read them too. I thought maybe I would try to talk a little bit about the practical aspects of how I think faith and poverty really go together. And bear in mind, of course, this is pretty much my own experience. It's what I feel. It's what I've experienced. I think it probably first started when I was in Congress. I won't talk about the faith part, but I'll bring it up as I go through this. But I was chairman of the Select Committee on Hunger in Congress, and this was in 1984, and we were hearing of these alarming calls for help from Ethiopia. And it was the time of the major famine there. And they had had civil war. There was a drought, civil war, and they had a hideous government then. And the government, I won't go into the kind of government they were, but they hid this whole issue of famine from the public. And it was about 5 or 6 months before anybody could get in there and figure out what happened. As a matter of fact, it was a BBC crew, I believe, that got in there and reported to the world. And I felt incumbent upon me as the chairman of the select committee to go to Ethiopia and to take a look at it, see it, try to understand it, walk around in it. And I was taken back by it when I went there, because I went with Mother Teresa's group, and we went to a little town about 2 hours above Addis by light plane, and we landed and we went to this medical clinic there. And as soon as I walked in, I noticed there were thousands of people gathered outside, and they didn't look good. I mean, they really looked like they were just ready to pass out. And as soon as I walked into this clinic, it was a very small clinic, probably no larger than this room. A doctor grabbed me and he said, "Come with me outside, I've got to show you something." And he said, "Because we can only pick 5 or 6 kids." He said, "There's at least 3,000 out there, they're all dying, and they have been walking for about 100 miles in some cases. And they haven't eaten, whatever water they had is dirty, they're sick. They're not only dehydrated, but a lot of them are dying." And so as I went outside with them, people just kept handing me their children. They thought I was a doctor. And half the kids I saw were dead. And we could only take 5. So 5 were taken into the clinic and the rest died. And I saw 3 days of that. I had never seen anything like that in my life. And when I came back from that trip, I said to myself, we do a lot of things in Congress that really don't amount to much. And this is what I thought I would do. I would spend my life trying to work on these kind of issues. So I began to travel, and I've been to well over 130 nations. Some nations I've been to at least a dozen times. North Korea 7 or 8 times, the Congo, Sudan, you name it, I've been there. I got involved with projects, and as I began to do this, I began to read the scriptures, and both the Old Testament and New Testament. Matter of fact, it's the same in the 3 religions of whether you're a Jew or Christian or a Muslim. You can't help but see the various issues that God talks about relative to the poor. There's over 2,500 verses in the Bible that deal with the issue of the sick, the poor, the hungry, the people in prison, the orphans, the widows, the elderly. And God is very clear on it. He wants us involved. And so as I began to grow and as I began to pray very privately on this, not realizing how I was going to present this, because I didn't want to wear my faith on my sleeve. I didn't want to look like a hypocrite. At the same time, it was beginning to be an authority in my life. It was beginning to be a foundation. And as I began to read Proverbs, there's some great verses in Proverbs. It says in so many words that God says that if you help the poor, you honor me. He also says in 19, he says, if you are gracious to the poor, and I'm paraphrasing, you lend to me. God doesn't say that many places. He says, if you help the poor, you lend to me and you honor me. He also says in the famous chapter of Matthew 25, you can look that up, he talks about the least of these. But I really respond to that in my life, and as chairman of the Select Committee on Hunger, it began to make sense. It was a way that I could bring God into my workplace. It was a way that I didn't have to preach about it. I didn't have to scream about it. I didn't have to shove it down anybody's throat. It was a way that worked for me. And it was a way in which I could say that, I'd rather see a sermon than hear one. And it was a great time for me. And just about the time that I was really we were really producing a lot of legislation, and my committee was called the Conscience of the Congress by the New York Times, and we had won all the awards, and I mean, we were the most bipartisan committee in the Congress. Anyway, the Democrats at the time, and I'm a Democrat, decided that, you know, we had high deficits, pretty much like we do today. And they decided that, you know, we have to make some kind of a move to look like we're, you know, living within our means. So they decided to start cutting their committees, and the first one they cut was my committee. Now, I'm really mad. What do I do? As a politician, you know, my old ways were to get back at them and to figure out a way to hurt them. But I thought, you know, I'm supposed to be a new kind of a person here. I'm supposed to be thinking in a different kind of way. And I went home and I told my wife, I said, you're not going to believe what happened here. They took this thing that I believe in so much away from me. And what the Congress failed to tell the people, they were going to take the money away that we spent on the committee, and they were going to give it back to the American people. But the fact is, the Congress kept it, and they never gave it back to anybody. So now I'm so mad, I'm so frustrated, and I went home, and my wife said, did you ever think about fasting? I thought, you got to be kidding. And it was a difficult time, so we went and read the scriptures on fasting, and the most famous one is Isaiah 58 from the Old Testament. Let me read it to you. Shout it aloud, do not hold back, raise your voice like a trumpet. Declare to my people their rebellion, and to the house of Jacob their sins. For day after day they seek me out, they seem eager to know my ways. Now God is sitting there talking about the things that he doesn't like. He says, why have they fasted, they say, and you have not seen it? Why have we humbled ourselves and you have not noticed? Yet on the day of your fasting you do as you please, and you exploit all your workers. Your fasting ends in quarreling and strife and in striking each other with wicked fists. You cannot fast as you do today and expect your voice to be heard on high. Now this is the kind of fast that I want you to do. This is when God says, this is the real kind of fast. Of a day to humble himself, it is only for bowing one's head like a reed and for lying on sackcloth and ashes. Is this what you call a fast? This is where he says, is not this kind of fasting I have chosen, to loose the chains of injustice, to untie the cords of the yoke, to set the oppressed free and break every yoke? Is it not to share your food with the hungry and to provide the poor wanderer with shelter when you see the naked to clothe him? Not to turn away from your own flesh and blood. Then your light will break forth like the dawn, and your healing will quickly appear. Then your righteousness will go before you, and the glory of the Lord will be your rear guard. And it goes on and on and on. That's Isaiah 58. So my wife and I were reading that, and I went out to a few of my friends, people that I trusted, people that were wise, and I said, look, I'm thinking about fasting. I'm not going to eat. Nobody's ever done this in Congress. It seems kind of strange, and you know, I don't want to look like a clown, but what do you think of this? And you know, they liked it. So this was a way. I didn't tell anybody that this was my inspiration, because if I did that, they would probably censor me and throw me out of the Congress. But based on this, and based on the fact that my wife was with me and some of my friends, I went before the Congress of the United States, outside the Capitol, and I said, look, this place doesn't have a conscience about these issues, and I am going to stop eating. Now, I'm not going to hurt myself, but I'm going to stop eating, and I'm not going to do anything. I'm not going to do anything until something good happens on hunger, because I'm sick and tired of this place, you know, taking away these kind of issues when in fact this is one of the more important issues that we can deal with. So I'm thinking, well, this is the end of my career. Nobody will ever understand this. My staff thought, Tony, you'll never get elected on this one. People won't understand this. And I didn't really try to explain it. So I went back to Ohio. I figured, well, I might as well face the music and get it over with. And so I went back to all my press back there, and I just happened to be speaking to a high school that day. And I explained to them what I was doing and why, and very interesting, they all decided to fast with me. Everybody in the high school, students, faculty, and their families. Now I fasted for 22 days. I didn't eat for 22 days. I just drank water. They took 2 or 3 days. Amazing thing about it is that caught on, and there was about 10,000 high schools that fasted with us, a couple hundred universities. And the press began to write about it in a very interesting way, in a very wonderful way, a very warm way, both on the left and the right. I'm really surprised. And a lot of good things began to happen. A lot of programs started. Legislation was starting to pass. People really being cognizant, not so much in the Congress, because they still don't know what to make of this guy that's fasting. They don't understand this one. Anyway, a lot of good things were happening around the country. And in the end, the thing that really got me to quit is the World Bank called me and they said, you know, we're very moved by this fast. We've been reading about it, and we're going to have a world conference on hunger and poverty, and we want you to come and speak and tell us about your fast, which I did. And when I was done, and when it was all over, they committed $100 million to the fast. $100 million went out from that one fast and went to poor people all over the world, mostly to women, and went for microfinance, microcredit, so they could start their own jobs. I tell you this story because it was an example of a way that I could bring God into my workplace without really talking about it very much. It was a way for me to love God. It was a way for me that I felt that it was necessary. And all I did was I stopped eating. I didn't have a campaign. I didn't have a team. I had no money. I had nothing except I believed this. And I believed that God would somehow honor it. And I was kind of testing him to see what would happen. I was pretty much scared, though. I figured my career was over. But I guess I tell you this because it was a way that I could bring faith into my workplace. It's kind of like what Mother Teresa said to me a couple times. One time I visited her in Calcutta, and I was pretty young then, and I said to her, she was taking me to the poorest section of Calcutta, and she said, or I said, as I walked and I saw all these people, just masses of people lying around, some very sick, but people just living on sidewalks, and you had to step over them. I said to her, I kind of blurted out, look at this. Where do you start? How can you make a difference? And she didn't say anything to me. There was a guy in the street, an older man, and she got some people to help bring him home to her place, to her hospice and her area where she took care of the poor and the dying, and she began to wash him off and just love him and touch him. And her point was, she came back to me later and she says, look, you do the thing that's in front of you. And I know that, you know, you're going to hit a lot of, you got one of the finest prime ministers here in the world. He's just been an amazing man, what he's done. And so you're going to hear a lot of talk and a lot of discussion about faith and globalization. But the one thing I want you to do, if you think about it, just do the thing that's in front of you. You don't all have to go to Calcutta. You got all kinds of problems here in New Haven. And just do that one thing. If everybody did that one thing, half the stuff we do in government we wouldn't need. But we don't do it. So those are things I want to leave you with. I'm trying to give you the idea of how does faith work. This is the way I think it works. I think you have to experience it. I think you have to walk around in it. I think you got to do the thing that's in front of you. I think you got to trust God. And if you do this, and if you do it with sincerity, you're going to be amazed what happens. So that's what I wanted to say to you today. Thank you very much.